Good evening, my name is Bhavyashri. Now I want to talk about validation check in Spring Boot application. So for any application, we need to do some validation code. So for example, login form validations, maybe some user registration validations, or for if you take transactions, maybe blacklisted transaction or maybe duplicate transaction may come. So these type of validations we have to do in our code. So we are using whenever we are developing applications, so many validation checks we have to do. So I am taking user registration, a mini application. There I will do some validation code. So this is my user registration application. Here I have written controller class, and for registration I'm using service class and interface also. So this is the service interface and this is the service implementation class. So whenever the control wants to communicate with the service, it has to communicate via an interface. So that's why I have taken the interface under some interface package, and then this implementation class is implementing the interface. So controller is to just control the request, like taking the incoming request and giving back the responses to the user. So this is the controller purpose. So we don't write any business logics here, we'll just pass the request and receives the response. So here I am calling this method register user. So whenever any user want to register, so he has to call this method, this register user. Actually the user will directly come to this endpoint for registration. So after coming to this point, this register user will be called, and inside it we are calling the register user method by using this reference. So it will come to here, all the business logic we will write here. So whenever the user want to register, first of all we will check whether the details are valid or not. So that is comes under the validation check, or we can call as all that is we will call as validation check code. So it might be anything. For any application we will do many type of application based on our requirements. So in my application I am taking two validations, username validator or password validator. So in order to do validations we have many approaches. We can write the entire logic here only, or we can make it to different methods, or we can make it to different classes. So these many approaches we can do, but every approach is fine. But in order to reduce the time and effort of a developer, we'll use the best method. So if you write entire logic, for example whatever the validations are there, if you write all the validation logic in this service method where the registration is going to created, if you write entire logic here, then it will be burden to read any particular logic. For example, if you write everything here, so if it in case it is a small application, at that time if you write all those logic, for example I'll consider there are 5 to 10 validation checks we have to do. So if there are only 5 to 10 validation checks, then even though if you write here the entire code, we can easily find out whatever the validation checks, and when we want to remove we can easily remove. But what if it is of 50 to 100? Then we want to, whenever we want to find a particular validation check, it is difficult to search in the entire method for particular logic. So we don't do that one. So instead of writing the entire logic in one method, we can use another approaches also. So now I think that, so now I will do that. I will take different methods for every validation check. So for example, for username check validation, I'll take some username validator method, and then for password and something like make payment method. It is also some validation, I will think that. Or maybe if that user is having a particular PAN card or Aadhaar card, So these type of validations I want to check. So if you want to check these type of validations, so if I use methods, separate methods for every logic, then whatever the methods that I have written for validations, those method I will call here, and whether if it is if the validation was correct, or if the validation, if the user meeting the validation checks exactly, so we can run this and we can make a registration for that user. This is another approach, but here everything every logic is writing in another method is one of, like, it is having one advantage called modularity, but as compared to the first one it is better, but it is not the best approach. Why? Because for example, after few days, if I want to add or remove any logic, so I can directly come to this class and I'll search for that particular method. If I want to remove, I can remove that one. But in case if that method is used in another method, that may affect that method also wherever it is used. So in this case we have to check every method whether it is affected by that deleted method or not. So even though if you don't have any work also, like even though if you don't have any that don't need to check all those methods, we have to do that one. Means we have to check all the methods whether we have to delete that method or not. So this is one other approach, but it is also a time wasting process. So instead of creating number of methods, and it also makes the class very bulk. So for example, if there are 50 or 100 types of validations are there, so we have to write 50 to 100 validation code here. That means 50 to 100 validation methods we have to write. So instead of that, we can do another approach, creating them into different classes. So like this way we can create. So every logic, for every validation check, I will create one class. This is one of the best one, but in order to achieve this one, again we have to follow some things, because by simply writing these classes by simply writing these validations as a single classes, it will not give you that much best approach or that much best result. Why? Because so this was my service logic, and so many validation check classes are there. So like this there are many validation checks. So whenever I want to check whether this logic is correct or not, sorry, whether this criteria is met by user or not, so these type of validation I want to check, then again I have to take all these classes references in my service implementation class. If it is one or two, we can easily take, or we can directly inject by using Spring Boot through the constructor injection or maybe field injection, or we can do dependency lookup also. We can use any other way, we can use any way, and we can directly get that object. But if we are one or two or maybe few classes or few validation checks, we can easily get that one. But if there are multiple classes, or we can say that if there are 50 to 100 validation checks, so writing all those objects here or injecting all those objects here, it is not a best practice, because we have to mention all those parameters as a constructor injection or maybe as a fields. So it will give you clumsiness to which the classes that we are adding, or maybe we will miss some validation checks also. So these type of errors will come. So instead of doing this one, we'll create separate classes, but I want to take only one injection. So what I'll do is I'll bind these two classes via some interface. So I'll take some validation interface. So if I take this validation interface, whatever the validation checks I want to do, all those classes has to be implemented this validation interface. So whenever all the classes are implementing this one, it can simply override the only one method that we mention in this validation interface. And rather than injecting all those validation check classes interfaces, all those validation checks implementation classes, we can directly inject this interface reference only. So via the reference we can call any other implementation class, because here upcasting will done, and using this reference, this interface reference, we can call any implementation class object. So here we'll write a validate method which will take user request. So in this way we can do some better approach, compare it to the other one. So again, if you write like this, and if you want to use only this reference, this interface reference, and with that reference if you want to get every class object, we cannot directly get, we don't write something like validation equals to some loop we cannot run, or there is no code to run everything. So again we have to do some more things to get the best approach. So what I'll do, so here I understood that every time I have to do like this, I have to check that code is correct or not code is correct, check whether that validation is meeting our criteria or not by using this validate method only. So every time I have to call this method via this interface reference. So I'll call this interface. So something called username validation checker, and same thing here. Here password validation checker. Similarly, there are some more checks are there. I am taking only two validation checkers. So using this validation reference, which is the interface reference, I can easily call this method. So whatever that object they are passing, that class object only will be taken by the Spring container, and only that is implemented in our class, in my register service implementation class. So I can write something called validation.validate. Here I have to pass user request. So this is I have to do. Here also I have to do the same thing. By using this reference only, I have to call this method, and whatever the object we are writing here, so that if you write PVC, so that class object method will be called. So basing on the object that we are giving here, so that class method will be called. So everything is same, and every time we are writing the same logic. So instead of writing everything in a line by line, we can use for loop, because it is something like everything is repeatedly happening, only this thing is changing here. So only this is changing, the left side part will be same for every time. So I can run a loop, but here there is a question that how can I run a loop, because we don't have any code, like something like if you want to get all the implementation class via loop, we don't have code like that. So what I'll do is, here I'll take some unique string names for every class. Maybe for user validation check, I'll take something like this, and for password validation check, I'll take something like this. So I want to take unique string names for every implementation class, and I want to map it these string names with these implementation classes according to that one. So maybe, so this is username, so I want to map this to this one and this to this one. It's simply like string and class mapping, so I can use mapping here. We have in collections we have map. In order to do key based mapping, key value pair based mapping, so I'll use something like this. Here the class is which is implementing this validation. So in this way I can map. So whenever I pass or asking for this particular unique name by passing this username validation checker or maybe password validation checker, so by passing some unique string name I can get the class. So in this way I can achieve best approach for this validation code. So first of all I'll create this interface and checker implementation classes. So here I'll write some method. I have to take the request. I don't want to throw any exception as of now. I'll just simply call this one. So now I'll write the implementation classes for this validation interface. I can create those implementation classes under the same implementation package. If you are having, like we are having many validation checks, it is better to take some other package. So it has to implement the validation. So it is created as it is a service class. I'll annotate with service. Whenever this object has to be created by the Spring container, it will easily create if you annotate something like this. Maybe service we can write, component we can write, or REST controller. So basing on our requirement we can annotate the classes something like this, maybe service component. So here it is a service class, so that's why I am writing service annotation. So I'll create some other class. It is also implementing this same validation interface. This is also a service one, so I'll implement the service. Now this was done. Now I want to do key mapping, all these things I want to do. So again I can take one class, and in that class I can mention something class map registry, or I can take anything, any name I can take related to this one. So I can do all the coding here. In this way also can do, but whenever you want to put all those usernames, sorry, all those unique string names with the corresponding implementation classes, again whatever that we are writing here, everything we have to put manually. So we don't have any for loop in order to loop these unique names. So everything we have to put manually, and even though if you are writing all these unique names in particular property file, or we are looping it one by one, but we don't get this one by one. We have to make a map, but this mapping will not help you to get one by one without writing the manual code here. We have to use some loop in order to get one by one. So to get this, I'll use enum based mapping. So if I do enum map, then I can easily get string name, and whenever I pass the string name I can get the implementation class also. So this type of mapping I want to do. So I'll create some enum. Under enums I want to do so whatever the names that I have written here, the same things I'll write here also. So now here I have these unique names, but if you directly call this one and if you pass this one, then we'll get the name only, but I want name with class. So here I'll make a constructor, as it is a every field that we mentioned in enum will be a constant and it internally represents some object. So I can make construct. Wait a second. So I can easily write parameters here. As of now it is showing an error. Why? Because by default it is having the zero number parameterized constructor. It is user defined. So whenever if you don't write any constructor, it will having the default constructor. So that default constructor will didn't have any parameters. So that's why it is showing an error. So until and I write the constructor, it will show like that. So I will use some constructor over here. It has to implement or extend this validator, this validation. Now I'll write the constructor. So now this is my constructor. Now here the key mapped key value pair based mapping is done, but still I have to use this map. So inside this enum I will use that map. Now I want to add this string corresponding to this class. I want to add it as a key value pair based in this map. So I can simply use for loop here. Here how can we use for loop means, in validation enum we will having some method called dot values. So if you use this method, then we will get all the constants one by one. So we can use that in by assigning them into the array, we can do like this, something like validation enum. I'll simply write val enum. So if I write like this, so I'll get some array. So whatever that I have mentioned here, so same based array will get here. So in this way we can use for loop and we'll get the all constants. So at the time of this using this validation enum, I want to load everything, so I can use static block here. So if I use static block here, then at the time of using this validation enum only, all the validation map will be done and we can easily access them. And I want to write one method in order to get this class, this dot class file I need, by passing this unique name. So what I will do, so I will write one method. I'll write it as static. Why? Because no need to create an object for this one again. So whenever we want to use this validation enum, we can simply use this one. And here I'll pass the string name, string validation name. So if this, so here this validation name is the key for this map. So if you pass this key in get method, we will get the value. Something like if you pass this name, username validation checker, in get value in get method, then we will get this dot class file. So I'll use this mapping here. So like this we'll use and we'll get the dot class file. So this is the enum based class. So this is my enum where I am doing the key value pair mapping. So now I want to write the logic in order to get everything here. So this is my service implementation class. Now, so whatever the values are there here, this string unique names, I want to write in a separate file. Even though if you write here with some string array, we will write like this, some validation types. So something will pass those values here. So this is also okay, but it will again looks like a hard coding, so I don't want to do that one. So I'll use application properties file. So this is my application properties file where I have already written this logic. So whatever whenever a new validation comes, so for that new validation I'll simply add this checker name, like only unique string name. I'll just make write comma here and I'll again write some other validation. So something like this, I can easily write that one. And whenever the new validation came, so we'll write the unique string name here, and also here we'll make one more constant. So no need to write, no need to worry about the entire code, simply we can add here, so it is easy for us. So as of now I have already written some logic for this string unique names, so I can use this one here. So whenever we want to retrieve the application.properties values, then we have to use some annotation. So something like @value we can use. So this is the syntax for that one. Inside this brackets, we have to use the actual value. So now everything is perfect. Now we will get some string value here. So everything, all the validation stringness will come as a string here, like resultant string here. Now I want to separate them into by using this comma, like I want to differentiate, separate them like this. So I can use some split method, and I can take all those validation rows in string array. Then one by one we will go through, and whatever the rule or the check will be there, that we can pass in this method, then we will get the class easily. So now I want to do that type of coding here. So I'll take one string array, something called roles I will take. So I'll go through one by one by using some for each loop. So each rule I want to pass in that validation enum of method. So this is not the method. I will take the method that I have written there. Get validation by passing this one. So I don't get validation enum here. I will get some class which is extending that validator. I'll take the same whatever I have taken here. So, okay, I have to write validation here, so that's why it is showing an error. So I'll take validation only. Now it is recognizing. So now I got the dot class file. So if I pass this dot class file in application context, in the get bin method of application context, then I will get the object of that class. So first of all, I'll do some constructor injection for that one. And when I pass this application, when I pass this dot class file in the method of this application context, then I will get the object of that class. But every time I don't know to which class I have to hold with. So I'll use the validation interface, where it is an interface for all the validation checker implementation classes, so it can hold all the implementation classes objects. So it is better to write that one. So I'll use that validation bin here, and in application context get bin method, I'll just pass this dot class file. So then I will get one class object. So for every validation checker, I'll get that validation checker object. So that will be whole by using this validation, which is an interface for all those validation checkers. So now I have to call that method, that validation method I have to call. So now everything is fine. Now I'll do some log files here, then I can understood whether it is came here or not. In order to write log files, I have to use slf4j. Then I can use log files here. So this is username validation. So I will write as username validation checker. I'll save this one, and again the same thing I'll do it here also, whether I have to know it is coming to this place or not. So now I will save this one. Now I will try to run this application. Now everything is building successfully. Now I will run this one. It is running on the port number 8080. So I'll use Postman here to run that URL. I can use browser also, but by default browser will support only get type HTTP method. But when we want to use different type of methods like put, delete, so here there are some multiple options are available. We can use any option. Something called patch we can use, or delete we can use. So any HTTP method we can use. So for that one I am using this one, this Postman. So I have already written this URL. So whenever user clicks this one, and whatever the details that we have, that I am going to pass as a request body. So here I have taken the request body from the user, so I have to pass that one. So after that I will get the response, right? So that response will be will give you ID and URL. I will show my user response. So this is my user response. These fields I want to give back to the user. So after registration he has to redirect it to the login URL. So I will simply run this one here in my user controller. So this is my endpoints. So first of all it will come to this controller, and then it will come to this one. If you don't want to mention anything here, you can simply remove this one, and here also you can remove this registered path. So as of now I mentioned here, and there is no other method is there here, so it will directly come to this method only, to this registered user only. So even though if you don't write this one, it will work. So if you are having multiple methods, then we have to mention these paths in order to get the correct URL. So now I will pass this one. Now everything is fine and we are getting the output. And here from user it is coming to the registration servlet. Sorry, registration service implementation. Registration service implementation. So whenever it is coming here, after performing all the validation code, so everything is written here, so there is no error or exceptions are faced here in my validation checkers. I just simply written the code, so it will just print the log files. So username validation checker and password validation checker like this, and just return from that place. So that's why it is not showing any error. And after coming to this original place, so this place, after completing this for loop, so whenever all the validations are satisfied, then it will directly pass the user response to this controller. So the same response we are getting here in the form of JSON format. So this is the validation check. So thank you.